Welcome, everyone. Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
Hello, doing well, thank you.
Great to hear that, and really glad to have you here with us today. We'll wait for just a couple moments to get started and let everyone come in. But everyone in the chat, why don't you just let us know where you are joining us from today? And Joe, where are you calling in from? I know you had some nice weather maybe on a trip you were on recently.
Yeah, I've just got back from Brazil, a week in Brazil, which was really great seeing all the mathematical mindset work there. And now I'm on Stanford campus.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can get started. Hi again to everyone. I'm Ronak Shet, the founder and CEO of LIT Videobooks. We make learning from best-selling business books as fun and enjoyable as watching a movie or a documentary. Joe, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure to collaborate with you on the video book for Limitless Mind. Today, we're going to dive into how we view learning and how we can cultivate the growth mindset in ourselves. And for those of you who don't know what the summer reset is all about, it's a light touch, summer schedule friendly way to connect with big ideas. And each month this summer, we featured a different video book. And today we're going to focus on how to expand our capacity to learn and grow. We're also going to save the last 15 minutes for Q&A. So please add any questions that you have for Joe into the Slido link that's in the chat and upvote any questions that you really want to hear answered so that we know we can, highlight them in the Q&A. So Joe, before we dive in, I'd love to share a little bit about your background. So Dr. Joe Boaler is the Nomelini Olivier Professor of Mathematics Education. Apologies if I did not pronounce that correctly. At Stanford University. Uh, Joe has authored 19 books and numerous articles and co-founded ucubed.org, uh, or just ucubed, to give teachers, parents, and students the resources they need to get excited about mathematics. And she was one of the writers of the 2023 California Mathematics Framework and was named as one of the 8 educators changing the face of education by the BBC. Joe, what did I miss, and what are you working on at the moment?
I don't think you missed anything. A couple of different things. We have a really nice research study going on in a fourth grade classroom where we were funded to really find out what is joyful learning for these students. And we're watching the students do data investigations because we've noticed that they're so joyful when they do data investigations and they really enjoy them and learn so much. So, fortunately, we have an amazing fourth grade teacher who's willing to engage her students with data. So that's one of the things
Wonderful.
we're working on.
That's very cool. And well, I think kind of going into Limitless Mind, while I think, the content is focused on younger learners, um, and your general field really focuses more on growth mindset, which I think can kind of apply to everyone. So,
Definitely.
as we dive in, let's learn a little bit about what a growth mindset is from a clip from the video book and discover how neuroplasticity changes how we learn. So we're going to dive into a clip.
So the first key is about brains and the amazing evidence we have of our brains growing and changing. Many people think that they have kind of a math brain or an English brain, but actually every time we learn something, there's one of 3 things that happen in the brain. One is, if it's a new idea, you start a new brain pathway, which at first is a delicate pathway, but the more you learn, the deeper it becomes. The second possibility is you make connections between pathways. And the third possibility is you strengthen pathways you already had. You're not born with them, but they're developing every time you're learning. One of the neuroscientists, Norman Doidge, talks about the fact that every day you wake up, your brain is different from the day before.
Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to adapt and change depending on our experiences. Every time we learn, our brains form, strengthen, or connect neural pathways. We are not fixed. We are all on a growth journey. Neuroplasticity was discovered in the 1970s when neuroscientist Michael Merzenich and his team were making maps of monkey brains. When the team took a break and returned to the brains, to the scientists' surprise, they had changed. The boundaries between different brain areas had shifted, depending on how much they were used. For example, when the monkey uses his hand, it sends electric signals to specific parts of the brain. Modifying or blocking these signals resulted in a complete rearrangement of the neurons. Neuroplasticity was born. It was a revolutionary idea at the time, but now neuroplasticity is more or less widely accepted in the scientific community. There are many remarkable case studies that provide evidence for plasticity of the brain. One study examined specialised black cab drivers in London who have to take a very rigorous exam in order to get their licence. During the intense spatial training, their hippocampus grew significantly and shrank back down after they retired from driving.
It's all really fascinating, Joe. And I think having a growth mindset has become a lot more common today in terms of just the rhetoric. And that being said, I think a lot of people still believe that talent and intelligence is fixed.
Mhm.
What is the easiest way to explain to adults and maybe to kids that, their brains can grow and change at any age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree with you. Most people still do believe that brains are fixed and that students can or can't do something. And in my own work, we counter those myths by showing actual evidence from the brain, like we just saw in the video book. We know, as I said in that clip, that our brains are constantly changing, that we're connecting pathways or building them, strengthening pathways all the time. And we're not born with those pathways, they're always developing as we live. And so I share with people I work with, I share brain evidence. We also have them on our UCubed website. But I also share stories of people. There's a lot of inspirational stories. Christine Sandhaus is one I talk about in the book, who had half of her brain removed and went on to be on the honors roll in school. She got a master's degree. She's a speech pathologist now. And I share all of this with students and adults I work with, that our brains are in a constant state of change. So, yeah, I think we have many ways of countering the myths and sharing the evidence of brain plasticity with videos, with images, with stories, and all of them are really important.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And I guess maybe in your experience, like, what is the biggest myth about intelligence that you think kind of holds people back in work and life and in school?
Well, I work in the field of maths education where there are a few really limiting myths around, but the big one, I think, is the myth that you're sort of born with a certain brain, you have a maths brain or you don't, or an English brain. We know that's been absolutely refuted, but so many people still believe it, and particularly students who are learning, they start to think that if they struggle, they start to think, oh, somebody's got a better brain than I have. And of course, when those myths about intelligence and potential then get layered in with racist and gender assumptions about people, we have the sort of situation we have now. One of the things I talk about in the book is they've analyzed Google searches, and the most commonly searched words after "is my 2-year-old son" is "gifted." And that expression is put into Google 2.5 times more than "is my 2-year-old daughter gifted." So we have these fixed ideas of a gift, and then we also have these stereotyped ideas about who has the gifts. All of that is still very common in our society and in our educational institutions. And I think that's the biggest myth. I mean, in maths ed, I also try and counter myths that you have to be speedy to be good, or that maths is just about numbers and not all the ways we can counter maths. So yeah, it's important to really help people get over those ideas in education and in life.
Absolutely. I think That's really insightful, especially the Google search thing. I had no idea about that. Um, Now, Joe, also a lot of the people in the audience today are leaders at organizations, and we're also, parents of children that are getting ready to go back to school. Uh, are there some small daily actions that we can take to kind of prepare or strengthen our brain's ability to adapt and learn?
Yeah, there's a lot we can do. In fact, they found that young children have developed different mindsets by the age of 3, and they've developed them from the different types of praise parents give. So praise is really important, and that's something we can easily shift. Take out any fixed praise, which I hear all the time still, like "you're so smart," and replace it with growth praise. So we're saying things like, "Wow, that's a really cool solution you came up with," or "I really like the creative way you thought about that," or "It's really great that you achieved that. You must have worked so hard." Um, all of these sort of growth ways of talking, bringing them into our language. Sorry about my voice. I've been doing a lot of public speaking and it's not doing too well today. But we can change all of that in our daily conversations with people in work, with children, if we're parents, with students, if we're teachers, and just really always valuing growth instead of fixed ideas of being smart or not smart. If you're a teacher, it's really important to change the way we assess students. So we don't assess students by just giving them a score, but instead we are showing them their pathway of growth. That's another big idea in education that's important.
That's really interesting. And I think kind of tying into this is the idea that to have a growth mindset, you also have to be willing to make some mistakes and be
Yeah.
comfortable with making mistakes, and it's actually essential. So I wanted to take a look at a clip from the video book that talks about mistakes and failure and how that is actually essential for learning and growth. So we're going to dive in.
So the second key, I think, is very exciting and liberating, and it is about the importance of times of struggle and making mistakes, how important those are for our brains. Most kids, when they make a mistake in maths, feel pretty bad and start to think to themselves, I don't have the right kind of brain. It really leads into that fixed thinking. And it's not surprising that our kids in the education system feel bad when they make mistakes, because the education system is built around valuing correctness and giving kids tests when mistakes are penalized. So they start to get the idea that mistakes are bad and I shouldn't be making mistakes.
But learning is supposed to be hard.
Neuroscientists, when I've sat down and talked to them, they're very clear. They'll say, if you're not struggling, you're really not learning. Our education system, teachers, for example, have kind of been trained to save kids from struggle, particularly in the Western world. It's different in Japan and China and places, but we don't let people struggle, and kids think struggle is a bad thing.
In a teaching study, students in Japan were found to spend 44% of their time inventing, thinking, and struggling with underlying concepts. Students in the US did this less than 1% of the time. These different mindsets have led to different teaching styles. In China, Boaler observed a class where a teacher asked 3 questions in an hour, deep diving into each one, whereas a US math teacher usually goes through about 30 questions an hour. But when we are struggling and making mistakes, this is the best time for brain growth.
I love that quote. If you're not struggling, you're not learning. Um, it essential and sounds very crucial. But I think a lot of people don't see it this way. We don't really embrace failure. So how can we help folks shift from, a fear of failure to, embracing mistakes, especially sometimes in high pressure environments?
Yeah, really, it's really, really important. And as you shared, and as the clip shared, the times of struggle, the times when we're really under challenge, when we're making mistakes, those are the best times for our brains. That's when our brains are on fire with connectivity and growth. And just getting work correct might feel good, but it's really not a good brain workout. And this fear of struggling and fear of failure and uncertainty, I feel is very, very important to change. And I've done a lot in my career to try and change the messages about struggle. Actually, I should mention we have a new app, sort of an app called Struggly, which is designed to help kids feel good about struggle. And there's a lot of evidence for it. I like the work, and I talk about in my book, of Daniel Coyle, who went out and he studied really successful people. And what he found, and they were in all sorts of fields, math, sports, music. But what he found was none of them were born with something special, but they all worked in a particular way, which he called pushing at the edge of your understanding, where you're making mistakes, correcting them, making more mistakes. That time of pushing at the edge of your understanding, scientists describe as the zone of proximal learning. It's when, your brain is on fire with activity. So it's a really important job for educators, parents, others to help people feel good about times of struggle, and change their feelings about it. I mean, obviously, that's not an easy thing to do, particularly if you've grown up always thinking that correctness is what we should be aiming for. As an academic, I can share that we have to be comfortable with failure and with struggle. I mean, our whole career is about sending papers to journals, trying to get funding from grants. And I think pretty much every academic get constant rejection. Papers are rejected, grants are turned down. And if you didn't start to feel okay about that, you'd really have a hard time continuing, I think. And my PhD advisor was a really great academic called Paul Black in England. And when I was a really young researcher, I remember him saying to me, whenever you send a paper to a journal, think about the next journal you'll send it to when it's rejected. And that, I think, has been helpful to me over the years. I should also share that these messages I give of everybody being able to learn and equitable access get me a lot of pushback, and some of it quite aggressive. And I've had to learn to reframe that myself. And this is also about just feeling, well, if somebody really criticizes me, what can I learn from that situation? How can I reframe it? In my own work and the pushback I get, I have learned to think, well, these people are coming after me because I'm making a difference. They wouldn't bother otherwise. And so feeling positive about people coming after you is another really important strategy. So I encourage in my own teaching of teachers at Stanford, I teach them to do this practice. It's called a number talk, where they put up a number problem and hear from different students. And in my recent teachings of how to do this, I set us up in groups, and some of us are students and some are the teachers. And I say to all the students, when you answer the teacher, you only give mistakes. And the teacher learns different ways of reacting positively to mistakes and pulling the learning out of it and helping people feel good about mistakes. So I think all of us, whether we're parents or business people or teachers, need to model for the people we work with that we're okay making mistakes. We're okay getting feedback or being told something doesn't work or it needs to be done differently. I think it's hard to give the message that mistakes and struggle are good to others if you react negatively in your own life to mistakes and struggle. So, there's a lot of ways that we as adults can sort of reframe it for ourselves, really start to feel differently about times of struggle for ourselves, and then learn to give those messages to others.
It's really insightful. And, I totally agree in the world of entrepreneurship, right? I think you have to fail in order to build and grow and innovate. So that's really, really great advice. And Do you have any other kind of tactics that maybe workplaces or leaders can use to
Mhm.
reframe mistakes as learning opportunities?
I mean, I think it's really important for um, workplaces and others to share the evidence. I find when I work with young people at Stanford, I teach undergrads, that just sharing with them and showing them this is what happens in your brain when you make mistakes. This is the powerful sort of change in your brain from mistakes that changes them. They actually see it, they see how their brains work, and they start to feel better about times of struggle. So I think it's really important to help people understand getting everything right all the time is not good for your brain. Um, they have studied people's brains, learning, and shown how we're all of our brains are growing and changing all the time, no matter what age we are. Some of their studies that I talk about in the book were done in retirement homes where they looked at people, they did studies of their brains, and what they found was the older people who took on new projects, new ideas, were the ones who got the greatest brain growth. They were finding it difficult, they were struggling, and it caused really significant brain growth. And those who were doing activities that they'd been doing all their lives didn't get that. So, a couple of things I got from that. One is just the neuroplasticity all the way, throughout our lives. But the other is how important it is to have those new opportunities where we're likely to struggle. I think in the workplace, not pigeonholing people, thinking those people are good at that, they do that, these people are good at that, they should do that, but letting people try new things. Um, and I have a quote in the book that I really liked. It actually came from a teacher I work with and was describing how hard it was being a coach and how much failure she experienced. And she said, when you're in the valley, you're in the deep, dark trenches of change. Honor that time, work through it, and someday you'll be on the mountain looking back and be grateful. And I really like that quote because, it speaks to it can be hard going through those times, but one day you'll be in a different place and realize how beneficial it is.
That's really great advice, and I love that quote as well. So I guess maybe as a leader or as a teacher, there's a bit of a balance, right? Because you don't want someone to struggle for too long without feeling, any type of
Yeah.
support. So, how do you know when someone is struggling productively versus they're maybe kind of getting to the point of defeat? And at what point do you step in to help?
Well, I mean, I know most about this in education, as that's where I work. And it's a great question because I think some ways people have interpreted this message is struggle is good. And then they don't adapt their teaching in any way. So a lot of maths teachers give these short, closed, narrow questions. And if they give them out to students and just think, oh, struggle is good, I'm just going to let you struggle on it. And kids have no way to access the question, they don't know how to even start it. That's not going to be a good experience for kids. So, our message is always to pair these mindset messages, mistakes, struggle with a change in teaching. So, in maths education where I work, we emphasize having tasks which we call a low floor, high ceiling. So everybody can start, everybody can enter it, they go to high levels. And then when students, if they're finding something difficult, they have different resources they can go to. They can they have visuals. Maybe it's a visual task and they can think visually about it. They can model, bring in different models of things. They can use technology to help them. So, having tools to help them is really going to help them keep going. You need that struggle, but it needs to be somewhat accessible. So, I agree. You can't just say, just struggle on that, and people have no way of going forward, and it's very frustrating. But if we change the task so people have resources they can go to, doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher jumps in and takes away the time of struggle by telling you what to do. I think educators in the US, at least, and other countries have been trained to do that. So somebody finds something difficult, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to say, well, you do this and this and this. And the students go, oh, yeah, I'll do that and that and that. And teacher walks away, students completes the question. But the teacher has emptied the question of any cognitive challenge. And that's a problem. So, yeah, there's much we can do to encourage kids to struggle or adults to struggle, and having ways to move forward with technology, with visuals, with other things, and keeping the demand high for people as they do that.
That's really helpful. And I like the idea of kind of having resources or support along the way if you need, but still kind of letting, you know, the individual kind of figure out the problem on their own without just kind of being told the answer. Right.
Exactly.
And I do encourage everyone to watch the Limitless Mind video book because you mention many great keys throughout the chapters to help kind of unlock this way of thinking. For now, let's go ahead and look at one last clip to understand a crucial element to practice that helps you ensure you won't quit while learning to do new things.
The sixth learning key is about collaboration, and both the importance of collaboration, but also about collaborating differently. So we know that collaboration is important. When people connect with somebody else's idea, it both raises their understanding, it also requires deeper understanding to make that idea connection.
When we connect with someone else, our brain functions better. The orbitofrontal cortex and frontoparietal network are activated. This is the social brain, and it benefits problem-solving capacity. This is why we should never do math alone. In a landmark study from UC Berkeley, 60% of black students were failing calculus and dropping out of the school, while 0% of Chinese American students were doing the same. Researchers looked for cultural reasons, but in the end, it boiled down to something else.
They found there was one difference, and that was the Chinese American students were doing maths together. They were meeting in the dormitories and in the eating halls, and they were working on maths problems together. The African American students were going to the dormitory on their own, struggling with a maths problem and thinking, I don't have a math brain. So they instigated workshops where people just got together and did this maths together. Within a year, the failure rate of these students had dropped to 0. And within a couple of years, they were outperforming the Chinese American students. So connecting is important. And what we find is it also brings about equitable outcomes. There's a lot of evidence that when we have more connection, it brings about greater equity.
Overall, collaboration and diversity of thought uplifts everyone.
Such a wonderful message and a really interesting study. So how can we use this information about, collaboration to our advantage to, support children and adult learning?
Well, I, share a lot in the book and the video book about how we want to enhance the social brain, which is going to bring about better problem solving, diversity of thinking, and it uplifts everyone, as that clip said. But I also talk about better ways of collaborating. You can't just put people into groups and expect things to go well, especially adolescents, but really anybody, adults, young children. And I talk about 3 things being needed for good collaboration. One is just opening people's minds. And we encourage teachers to do a lot of work to have students be respectful of each other's ideas, and we model that in our teaching. The other is opening content, which I was sort of referring to earlier. With problems, instead of asking people for answers, asking people, how do you see it? Could you visualize that? Or how would you approach it? What are the different ways people think about it? I love brainstorms that have particular rules, one of which is you never put down an idea. You only generate, put down of ideas saying, oh, that won't work. It's not allowed. So, yeah, just having different people share their ideas will give a much richer solution path. And then another important piece, I think, which I talk about throughout the book, is embracing uncertainty, knowing that you don't have to be an expert all the time. I think this is a really important key that unlocks people. Some teachers won't try more open content in classrooms because they think, well, I don't know what, student might come up with something I don't know the answer to. And so they don't do it. They just do this closed content. But that is a great moment. I teach undergrads at Stanford and we do these sort of open maths tasks, and sometimes they take them in directions I've never seen, and I love that, and I love to learn from my students, and I will say, wow, I never thought of it like that, and let's find out more. That's really interesting. I don't sort of have this feeling that I have to pretend that I know everything all the time. So I think that's an important one for people. In the book, I interview a number of adults who've taken on the limitless ideas, and many of them talk about how they've learned to be okay with times of uncertainty and how that changed them in the workplace. How they used to go into team meetings like feeling that they had to know everything. But now they'll go into team meetings and they'll say, I don't know, but I'll find out. I'm gonna, I'll learn this or I'll find out more. So that really changes people. And yeah, I see somebody's put into the chat assigning roles in group work. That is an important way of having good group work. And I talk about that more in the book if you're a teacher and thinking about how to have groups work really well. But yeah, those three things of opening the minds of people and opening the content and helping people embrace uncertainty, those all help good collaboration and good group work. And working on those three things will bring about much more productive collaboration.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. And um, Joe, I think we have a lot of Q&A questions, so I think
Okay.
we might actually want to jump into some of those. But before we do that, wanted to kind of see if you had any final nugget of advice for the people in the audience. Is there one kind of mindset shift that you would suggest every listener to make immediately after the conversation today?
Hmm. Um, I would say that you, people listening to the conversation during today, when they encounter a moment of stress or they make a mistake or they don't know something, think about how you can approach that differently. Think about how you can reframe it as, oh, this gave me an opportunity to learn. Yay, I'm glad I did that wrong. Um, and that negative self-talk is often one of the worst things for all of us. We start to dwell on our own way of working negatively. And Carol Dweck, who I've been very inspired by over the years, talks about giving a name to your fixed mindset and talking to it. Like I might call my fixed mindset James and say, James, you're not going to come. I'm not going to have a conversation with you today, and you can stay out of this. The other thing I learned recently is this is kind of a weird one, but turns out if you're having negative thoughts and you hum, the thoughts go away. So I actually have tried this and it works. It's something about getting your brain engaged in a different way. So yeah, I would just say during today, think about something that might stress you out normally and or make you feel bad about yourself, and really think about how you could reframe that and turn it into a good opportunity.
I love that. Well, going to turn to Q&A now. So one of the first questions here. My 16-year-old has always avoided doing things that she's not already good at, which I think hinders her growth. Is that a problem? And how do I help her open her mind?
It is a problem. That is a sign of a fixed mindset, and you want to do well all the time, so you stick with things that you've done well on before. They've actually found that in studies of parents praising their kids by telling them they're smart. What happens is, first of all, they hear they're smart and they think, oh, good. But then later, when they mess up on something, they think, I'm not so smart. And they've found that when people praise kids for being smart, for having done something well, and they say, oh, you're so smart. And then they give them a choice of an easy task or a difficult task. Kids who are praised for being smart all choose the easy task because they want to show their smartness again and again. So it's totally about mindset. I recommend reading the book and getting lots of strategies for helping your 16-year-old develop more of a growth mindset. I also have on our UQ'd website, there's a course for students. It's under courses, it's free. 6 15-minute sessions that help students get the ideas of mindset. And over 1 million people have taken that course, and we've found it to be very, very effective for young people. So that's a good strategy too.
Thank you. And all right, this is kind of an interesting one. Do you think technology like AI helps or hurts our ability to stay in a growth mindset? Or also, how could we use AI to help us stay in a growth mindset?
That's an interesting one. I can't say I've particularly thought about that yet. I'll start thinking about it. I do think AI obviously is providing different opportunities for us to use that to help us in our thinking. And my hope for it in education is that AI is so good at doing kind of the procedural work, calculations and procedural content, it will open up space for learners to do what we need them to do, which is to think more creatively and flexibly and think about why things work, all of that that AI can't do very well yet. So that's my hope for AI, that it gives us tools and we can use them, and that will allow our brains to do more important work. So I don't know how it affects mindset. I will think about that one though.
All right, another one here. People with a growth mindset focus on mistakes to learn. However, discussing mistakes to your team can feel like pointing out mistakes to them. Is
Mm.
there a way to prevent this, or maybe kind of a way to frame it
I
correctly
mean,
to your
I
team?
think with a team, I wouldn't necessarily go through mistakes, but I would reframe how I work with them. And I would probably raise a mistake to the whole team. If in doing that, I can show the benefit of a mistake. So there might be times where you can say somebody made this mistake and it led to a different way of thinking, and actually turned out really positively in these different ways, or um, because mistakes can often bring about positive outcomes. I like to talk in my teaching to students about when they were trying to solve Fermat's last theorem, that Andrew Wiles came up with a proof and it had a mistake in it. He presented it to hundreds of people. It was a big international event. There was a mistake in it. But his mistake led to a new branch of mathematics. And so, yeah, if you can find some good in a mistake, then I think it's worth highlighting it and saying how great it is and how good it is for all of us. But just going through them probably isn't that helpful.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I like the idea of if there's something positive to learn from the mistake, then maybe worth highlighting to the team.
Mm.
Um, Another question here. I want my child to feel capable, but without giving false praise. How can I balance support with honesty?
Well, I think we always want to praise students for making effort and for trying things, and um, even when students have done something wrong, I find ways of encourage them by saying, maybe there's something in their thinking that has some validity. Sometimes in maths, a student will have a misconception, and usually I find a way of reframing that. Like, oh, I see what you're thinking. You're thinking that we use a principle from another area, but and that's a really good thing to think about. Or I really love that you've put all that effort into that, because that's so important. Really focus on the process more than the result is, I think, my advice.
Perfect. And then I think we'll add one more question here before we wrap up. So how do you keep a growth mindset when you are burned out or overwhelmed?
Well, those are the really important times to have a growth mindset. And burnout isn't good, and we need to work out ways of, giving ourselves the space and time to get through times like that. But I think what we those are the difficult times, and I think the real test of mindset, whether someone has a growth mindset, is when they're in a difficult situation. It's easy to have a growth mindset when things are going well. So yeah, just always remembering the principles, even when you're going through those difficult times of, I will get through this and I'll look back on it someday. And we'll see the positivity, and just knowing that even going through difficult times is all going to be good for your brain, for your development. I have been through some really awful times and of late, because I was working on an equity focused framework. And I really had to hold on to my growth mindset through those times. I really had to hold on to it. It was hard. Of, this time is like this because, it's making people uncomfortable. So why is it doing that? Understand it more, get the bigger perspective on what's happening. So I would just say, the more you can work on your mindset, the better those negative times will be. And it's really worth spending time on your own mindset. We talk about how to share growth mindsets with children, with people in our businesses, but working on your own mindset is a really important place to start.
It's a really great lesson to end today's conversation with. Thanks again, Joe. It's been such a pleasure to have this discussion with you. And to all the attendees, thank you. Just a few really quick housekeeping items. So check your Zoom confirmation email about how to access the video book. And we will also send over the recording of this conversation to all registrants. And you can also find it on our YouTube page as well as on our Spotify. And please follow our LinkedIn page to find out about our upcoming author fireside chats. And outside of that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. And Joe, hopefully you recover your voice and all
Yes,
pretty
I will.
soon as well. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here.